to this edition of the YAHOWAH blog. This is part 5, I believe. Oh, part 6. I have been corrected by our producer. In this case, we have a full-time technician now running the YAHOWAH blog. So we are delighted to have Richard at the controls, and he has informed me this is now episode 6. And we're about halfway through this amazing psalm, the 103rd. It is a Mizmor. It was written about David, who is, according to God, the Messiah. He is, according to God, the Son of God. He is the former and returning king of Israel. He is the person that Christians have a conniption fit over if you tell them that their Jesus was a myth and nothing but a crude counterfeit of this individual, the actual Messiah, the actual Son of God, the actual Savior who came. And he was the person who in 33 CE was actually crucified, having written an eyewitness account about it in the 22nd Mizmor. He is the named subject of Isaiah 9, where we're told that a child is born and a son is given to us. This is all about David. And this Mizmor that we're considering, the 103rd, walks us through that process, even talks about how it was Dod's nefesh soul that fulfilled Pesach and Matzah on our behalf so that we might enjoy Bikurim. He is the kinsman redeemer of Yisrael. And while this is a fact that is sparsely known, in fact, until I recognized it and could explain it, prove it, and provide all manner of insights relative to it, no one on earth had even considered it. I even had one person said, "So, if you're the only one who knows about this idea of David being the Messiah and Son of God and our Savior, then there's no chance that it can be anything other than satanic." And of course, when you read something like that, you say, "Oh, beautiful deduction." So what you're saying is that God's satanic, since he's the one who inspired all of the statements pursuant to this. So my guess is that is not exactly what you ought to deduce from the fact that there are 1,100 mentions of Dode throughout the prophets and his Mizmor Psalms and the writings, and that Dode is presented as the only Messiah who is anointed on God's instructions 3 times. The only person that Yahweh calls his son, doing so 3 times. He is the one person that Yahweh says, "He is my chosen king for my people, and he will return because I am establishing his throne forevermore." He is the one person who wrote an eyewitness account about crucifixion 1,000 years before he endured it in first person to explain exactly how he would go about fulfilling Passover as the Lamb. Dode receives virtually every meaningful attribute and title that a person could possibly have bequeathed upon them by God. And he is God's chosen one, according to God, his most beloved. And so to promote anyone, whether it is Bar Kokhba, as in the case of rabbinical Judaism, it is Iesu Christou, and therefore Jesus Christ in terms of Christianity, or it is Yeshua or Yesha, or whatever they want to create another false name for him as a part of Messianic Judaism. These are all an egregious offense to God. God has one Messiah, one Son, one chosen one, shepherd for his people, one king for his people, and one individual who volunteered to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Makudim on behalf of the covenant family. This Mizmor is all about that man. Now, of course, it is in the nature of religion to define their God by the way that he interacts. Oh, wow, we just had a complete meltdown of our teleprompter here, and it's very difficult for me to obviously to read the testimony that is the translations that I have done of the Mizmor without the teleprompter working. So we are in a position where we will have to cut it off. But between now and the time that we can do so, I do want to encourage everyone to please listen to the series that we have done. The teleprompter has stopped working in its entirety, so we're going to have to just end the show. There's going to be, I don't think, any way for you to fix it, but you're more than welcome to try. This is Richard. Richard, say hello to everybody. What I wanted to encourage is, before we just end this program here, is I would really appreciate it if you would all give a listen to the Betrayal of Israel series, so that it is better understood what Donald Trump is doing to betray God's people. And I don't really care if you've been political, if you are a conservative, if you're a liberal. I just want you to know what's happening to Israel. And I want you to know that it doesn't matter if you believe that Netanyahu is your guy or that you love Trump. The fact of the matter is that Israel is being betrayed. Netanyahu's strategy of continuing to proclaim that the war will end when Hamas is gone and they have surrendered and they have no more weapons and they're no longer in control of Gaza is an impossibility. It's been an impossibility from the beginning, and you cannot fight an endless war without the entire world turning against you and losing your own country and your own soldiers in the process. That is not a solution. Trump's current policy is for Israel to capitulate. That is the essence of it. It has been presented in every possible way, and the way that it is presented says quite simply, "Oh, I think we're going to make an attempt here at. We'll just go ahead and just take it out. Just take the laptop out, Rich. Okay, you can just take it out and we can reboot it." But the present position, as articulated by the devil's advocate, Steve, I'm owned by Qatar, Witkoff, is that the only solution now is for Israel to end the war. Oh, there we go. Let's just see if it works. There we go. Well, we got it back. Nicely done. So we don't have to end the program. We just have a lot of stammering from me, and that's part of doing a live stream. But it does give me the opportunity to talk about the desperate situation Israel is in, because, oh, well, that didn't work. We're not in the mirror format. See, on a teleprompter, what we do, so that you know, is that the camera goes behind it, so that you can look in the camera if I need to cite a passage from the Torah, the Nabi, the YAHOWAH Mizmor, and because the way the mirror works, the text has to be inverted, because a mirror, you know how it turns, what is on your left appears on your right. Everything in a mirror is inverted. Now you've got it correct. Well, that is the nature of a teleprompter. So you have to have a laptop program that will take something that you've written. In these cases, everything that I'm sharing from, I have actually written. I've done the translations myself. I have also, we're going to see if this works. We don't know where the cursor is. It will scroll. We just don't know where the cursor is relative. Oh, we don't even know where we are now. No, we're going to have to start over. We have no idea where we are in the text. So Witkoff is requesting of Israel, demanding of Israel. Trump is demanding of Israel. Is they simply end the war. Now, that cannot be done without Israel surrendering. It means that Hamas won in every possible way. And that's just the reality of it. And what it means is that Hamas stays in power. They retain their weapons. They retain control over Gaza. They have the opportunity to continue to do what they do best, which is to inspire people to kill Jews. And, they are really good at that. And the trade is for 20 living hostages to be returned. And yet it's total suicide. 20 hostages will cost Israel 2 million lives. It's thinking with the heart or feeling with the heart as opposed to thinking with the head. It is grossly inappropriate, terribly immoral to sacrifice the lives of what will be, well, at least 2,000. I think far more than 20,000, more than 200,000. According to the prophets, we're going to see more than 2 million Jews lose their lives to Islamic jihadists. And to receive 20 lives back, when it leads to that, is insane. The Trump administration is no longer calling for Hamas to say that they are willing to accept existence. They're not willing to force Hamas to lay down their arms. They're not willing, and not even talking about Hamas leaving power. They're not talking about permanently closing the corridor between Egypt and Gaza to prevent Hamas from rearming. There is nothing of that. It's just end the war because the war is gruesome, and therefore trade surrender for 20 lives. And there's no one screaming, that's stupid. And yet you can't rally around Netanyahu's choice. He made a terrible one initially when Netanyahu told Israel that their plan would be destruction of Hamas, wiping out Hamas, ending Hamas's rule over Gaza, killing and eliminating Hamas terrorists, disarming Hamas. When he made that his war goal, he established a goal that cannot be achieved. Gaza has been turned into a demolition site, which has turned the world against Israel unnecessarily, because while many Hamas leaders have been killed, that's a good thing considering what they did. There are just as many Islamic jihadists who are armed and ready to kill Jews in Gaza now than there were before that invasion began. So Israel has killed between 15 and 20,000, and there's some 60,000 Islamic jihadists in Gaza ready to perpetrate the next armed assault against Israel. So it backfired. It turned the world against Israel. It led to twice as many IDF soldiers dying as there were hostages, Jewish hostages, kept in Gaza. It was everything that you can imagine counterproductive. And there is no solution for Netanyahu to say, we're going to go back in and we're going to resume the war, we're going to continue the original war goals, is insane because they cannot be achieved. It's impossible. I don't care how patriotic you are in Israel. It is impossible. You've fought this war for over a year now, and the situation is worse than when you began. So Netanyahu's plan isn't sane. Trump's plan is suicide. Now, typically you'd say, well, okay, so you're critical of both. You got a point on both. What's the answer? Well, I wrote about the answer. I gave Israel the specific answer as to how to deal with the Islamic problem. And I wrote about it in what is now, in probably a 40 or 50 page open letter. It's called At War with Religion. It is chapter 3 of volume 1 of Goddamn Religion, the series that I have done to expose and condemn Islam based upon Muhammad's and Allah's own words. And I shared that open letter 3 times now as part of the YAHOWAH blog. I have made it available as an independent post on yadayah.com, and it is free in volume 1 of Goddamn Religion, which is available for free again at yadayah.com or goddamnreligion.org. And in it, I presented a plan that would prevail for Israel, that Israel would survive, not only survive, but thrive. And in it, what I said is that I anticipate Israel invading Gaza, and I'm going to, and it did. And I made it very clear that if Israel attacks a symptom of Islam as opposed to dealing with the religion of Islam, that bullets and bombs will manufacture more jihadists than are killed. And that's exactly as it turned out. So what I told Israel that you need to do if you're going to prevail is that, one, you need to first and foremost read Goddamn Religion. It is the most comprehensive presentation of the Islamic scriptures ever written. It presents the Quran for the first time in chronological order and set into the context of Muhammad's putrid, perverted, disgusting, reprehensible, murderous life, using the 4 oldest Islamic sources regarding the words and deeds of Muhammad, what's called Sunnah. And by taking those 4 sources, 2 of which are chronological, 2 of which are contextual, and using those to reorder the Quran chronologically, providing multiple translations of the Quran, presenting the Quran even using an interlinear so that it is an exacting translation and rendering of the Quran, presenting the entire Quran, that's why it's 4,200 pages, along with every hadith that helps understand the context and the situation of that surah's revelation as those situational scriptures were applied to Muhammad, even explaining how all of the material in the Quran came to be there. With the initial surahs that were revealed around the Kaaba and what was Petra, not Mecca. Mecca didn't even exist at the time. That what we find is that they were all pilfered from Arab converts to Judaism in Yemen. They were called Hanif. And it was their poetry, their style, their rhyming, their rhythm, and their rhetoric, even their god's name, Ar-Rahman, that was stolen to create the initial surahs of the Quran. All of the Medina, which is Yathrib in the day surahs of the Quran. Excuse me 1 second. You stop biting your paws, please. Asher has actually made considerable progress these last couple of days because she has been gone through a bathing and medication regimen from both myself and mostly from Richard to help cure her of that fungal infection that is driving her crazy, where she gets at times to be self-destructive, which is what I'm trying to stop when I reach down and grab her and try to distract her attention from hurting herself in this process. What I was saying about the Yathrib surahs, which are now called the Medina surahs, almost all of them were pilfered from rabbis in Yathrib. There were 30,000 Jews in Yathrib at the time that Muhammad invaded their town. At the time he left, there were none other than the women that they had specifically chosen to rape, and the children they sold into slavery to buy more weapons, and the men they butchered, decapitating them, perpetrating genocide on the Jews of Yathrib. But before they turned on them, Muhammad, it has to be centered, Muhammad bought all of his Quran surahs from the rabbis. And in so doing, what he ended up doing is incorporating sometimes entire stories out of the Talmud, sometimes even verbatim out of the Talmud, into the Quran. And at other times, he took bits and pieces of Talmud stories and then twisted them to fit his situation. And because it still wasn't enough, he couldn't buy enough and remember enough of these Talmud recitals that the rabbis had provided him, he ended up just repeating himself ad infinitum. That is the composition of the Quran, combined with Muhammad, or Allah's insistence that all Muslims must die, killing for him, and Allah's insistence that he spends all of his time in hell torturing those who do not capitulate. So you add those elements to it, and then there's the utter subjugation of women, so that Muslim men are willing to fight and kill for Muhammad and Allah. That is also part of this. Rich is having a real challenge going around this thing. He is doing everything he can do here to 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 wrestle it to the ground. No, it's still a mirror backwards. I think we just give up, Richard. We'll do this on another go. We are for the effort here. I appreciate the effort, but it's a very temperamental program that runs teleprompters. So the Quran also adds what's called the never-ending argument, which is Muhammad being called a demon-possessed fraud who was plagiarizing the Quran, all of which is true, and a ruthless terrorist by those who knew him best. So everyone that knew Muhammad well denounced him, as I do. And the Quran, of course, says, no, that's not true. And because you're saying that, Allah's going to torture you forever in hell. But that basically is the entirety of the Quran. And it's a horrible situation. But having taken the time to prepare all of that, to serve it up to you, to provide 4,200 pages and 5 volumes of copiously documented and comprehensive information of the whole Quran and Muhammad's life from his own words and deeds as they are presented in the Hadith, all brought together in one place so that you could know everything there is to know about Allah, Muhammad, and the formation of Islam, as well as Islam's genocide against Jews, and the Pledge of Aqaba, which begins the Islamic era, which is Muslims pledging to wage war against all mankind. It is all there for you. Yahweh himself asked me to write it for you. He happens to be God. He knows why it was important for you to read it. And so the very first thing that I asked Jews to do in responding to the 10/7 invasion was to read Prophet of Doom. And because Prophet of Doom wasn't as complete as it needed to be, I began immediately thereafter expanding it, improving it, and turning it into the 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion, which is necessary. If Israel's leaders and Israelis do not read goddamn religion and come to understand the nature of your enemy and understand that you cannot win a war against a religious opponent with bullets and bombs, then the fate is going to be exceedingly dismal. The next invasion is going to be 1,000 times worse than the previous one. So that was the first thing I said you must do. The second thing that I said Israel must do is that once you know who your enemy is, Islam, you need to know who your friend is. You need to know who God is. And there is no one in Israel that knows who God is. That's just the reality. You erased Israelis and Jews have erased Yahweh's name from their lives and even from his revelation. They call him Hashem, G-D, blessed be he. Stupid. Yahweh has a name, and in the third statement that he etched in stone, he said the negation of his name is an unforgivable crime. And yet, it is the most egregious crime that Jews have committed. You need to embrace Yahweh by name. You need to throw away the Talmud, reject Judaism, reject Christianity, reject Islam, stop being religious, stop being political, and return to Yahweh. If you can't return to Yahweh and accept him on his terms, then there is no hope for you. So that was the second point that Israel must do if it's going to prevail. Now, I've helped considerably in that regard too, because I have written for Israel and for Jews the 35 books that sit on the shelf at YADAYAH.com. They're all free. They're based upon amplified translations from the Dead Sea Scrolls, filled with thousands of powerful and unique insights that have been unheralded prior to this time. And one of the things that they reveal is that there was no Jesus. There was no one by that name or title, Christ, who lived in Judea at anywhere close to this time. And he is nothing but a mythical fraud that is a counterfeit of the actual Messiah, the actual Son of God, the actual Savior and King of Israel, David. And this is important because, well, King Daud had an exceedingly effective approach to dealing with the Philistines. And he's a lot better at it than Israel seems to be now in dealing with those who have usurped their name and are parading around as Palestinians. The third thing that was essential is not to negotiate with the devil. In other words, Israel could not do what it has done in the past. For example, the Shalat trade, Israel traded 1,000 Islamic terrorists for one IDF soldier. Trading 1 for 1 was a bad idea. Trading 1,000 to 1 was suicidal. Shinwar was one of those who was traded. Israel paid, in terms of those tortured, raped, abducted, murdered, and critically injured, paid between 4,000 and 5,000 Jewish lives for one life. That is immoral. That is what that trade cost you. You traded one life for 4,000 to 5,000. And I said, if you do this again, now it's going to be trading 200 lives for 2 million. So that was the next thing that was critical. I said the next is that Israel nationally has to make it a criminal offense for an Israeli citizen or any media outlet within Israel, licensed in Israel, to use the term Palestinian other than to point out that it is a ploy designed to perpetrate genocide against Jews. There are no Palestinians. There is no Palestine. The myth of the Palestinians was invented by Yasser Arafat in conjunction with the Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt, and Russia's KGB in 1968, with the current head of the United Nations sitting in his lap. And the purpose was to create the idea that Israel, rather than Jews, rather than inhabiting and returning to their own land, had stolen lands of the Palestinians because the country was Palestine. But there is no Palestine. There has never been a Palestine. There are no such things as Palestinians. That all of the inhabitants of Gaza, Judea and Samaria, and those living inside of Israel proper are nothing but malcontent Muslims. So there is no such thing as a Palestinian. It is a call and a declaration to perpetrate apartheid and genocide on Jews. And because Israel has allowed it to continue to be used, because Israel's politicians and media and people use the term to describe these malcontent and murderous Muslims, the world has accepted it as true. And now there are marches that say free Palestine, not recognizing there is no Palestine, and nothing in Islam is ever free. It is a religion of submission, of slavery. And what they're calling for is the eradication of Israel and elimination of Jews, their annihilation, so that the Muslims can take over the entire region, just as they have colonized and subjugated the entire Middle East, all the way from Iran all the way into Morocco. So this is what needs to be done. You cannot use the term Palestinian or Palestine unless it is to point out that the term exists for one explicit purpose, which is the genocide of Jews. Next, I told Israel that you need to show some courage. You need to show some genuine wisdom and recognize that the Islamic assault and invasion into Israel was called Al-Aqsa's flood. It was based upon the Quran. It was identical to what Muhammad did at Kabar, where he massacred a Jewish farming community. It was even the same community of people with the attacks on the kibbutzim. Same shouting of Allahu Akbar, which does not mean God is great. It means Allah is greater, and greater than the Jewish God is the claim that Allah is making, because Allah is Satan and wants to be perceived as greater than Yahweh, who is actually God. And since the raid on 10/7 was a mirror of what Muhammad did to the Jews in Kabar at the inception of Islam, and it was called Al-Aqsa's flood. The same thing to do would be to tell the Muslims that abducted the Jews that if they're not all returned within 24 hours, you will destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque. Every stone tossed away. You could even take the stones, put them inside of your F-15s and drop them on the Kaaba for all I care. It's a stone pile to stone God, so why not bring them some more? But the Al-Aqsa Mosque needed to be raised, and if they did not comply with that trade of Al-Aqsa Mosque for all of the hostages and the prescribed period of time, the next would be the Dome of the Rock. Either release all of the hostages that you took, or we will destroy the Dome of the Rock. It needs to be destroyed anyway. It's nothing but a trophy that put on top of the home for Yahweh's name on the Temple Mount to show that Allah had conquered Yahweh. It is an anathema to God. It is a disgrace to the Jewish people. It is a horrible, horrible blight on Jerusalem. And so I would have torn them down. And if the hostages are not returned, understand that no nation has ever been successful in defeating a foe by prioritizing the return of hostages. The moment that becomes your priority, you are suicidal. You are guaranteed to lose, which is precisely what Israel did. But this would at least have been a way that you would have had a reasonable chance of getting them back. And if you didn't get them back, you'd at least be able to tear down the motivation for these Muslims. And then you preclude Muslims from even stepping foot on the Temple Mount. That is what needed to be done. Then I told Israel that the next step in all of this is that you're going to be engaging in a media war. And social media has become the town square and the newspaper for the world. And the social media at the time was owned and controlled by very liberal individuals and individuals who were, for the most part, anti-Semitic. Even though two of them were owned by Jews. Now that has changed somewhat, in that while X remains as anti-Semitic as ever, maybe worse, and Facebook is still not YouTube is still not a conducive place to present a pro-Israel, anti-Islamic message. Facebook with Zuckerberg has changed appreciably and is now a decent home for God's message in defense of his people to be presented. But what I said is that while it is against Jewish sensibilities to show the carnage that Muslims perpetrated, and they documented their own atrocities. They were very proud of them. So they were screaming Allahu Akbar, filming themselves, killing, raping, torturing, mutilating Jews. They plundered Israel. They raped women, gang raped them. They mutilated women. They cut babies out of the stomachs of pregnant women. They burned children alive. They committed grotesque acts of mass murder, filming themselves while shouting Allahu Akbar, confessing to the crime. The only way Israel had a chance of prevailing in the online war, which is the war that ultimately the Muslims won and Israel lost, is to have taken every one of those atrocities as they were, unmasked, and show them all immediately. Without mask, without reservation, and demonstrate every camera, every angle, every even autopsy, everything, along with a narrative that explains who these people were and how this happened, along with, in addition to the lives being lost and being mutilated by the Muslims, but a beautiful history through photographs and words of these individuals prior to that. So we know the lives that were stolen. And while they said, oh, it'd be traumatic to the surviving members of the family, it's already traumatic. They lost their loved ones. Make their lives count. Rather than saying, may their memory be a blessing, make their memory be a blessing. And the only way to do that is to win the media war by showing how precious these lives were and how savagely they were taken. But Israel refused to do so. It wasn't until very long afterwards they began to show some of the Islamic GoPro pictures, almost no descriptions as to what the scene was when Israelis went in after this had all transpired. And it's a tragedy. The average IQ of the Muslims in Gaza is in the 60s. The average IQ of the Jews in Israel is around 115. And yet the Israelis were played for fools by fools. You just didn't think your way through this. And now you're in a horrible situation because you invaded Gaza and there's no way out. There's no way to seize victory from defeat at this point. Sure, you've destroyed Gaza. What did that accomplish besides turning the world against you? I'm delighted that you were able to find and hold um, hundreds, if not thousands, of very specific Islamic terrorists who perpetrated and inspired 10/7 accountable. But at what cost? It is a grave travesty that has taken place. So this was the plan that I presented to Israel, along with one other item that, of course, is not popular with Israel. But unfortunately, the entire upper echelon of the IDF needed to resign. And people who were not culpable in 10/7 needed to take their place. All of them had to resign. The entire cabinet and the Netanyahu government had to resign. They slept through it. And they were actually guilty of funneling Qatari money to Hamas, thinking that Hamas would be a nice rival to the Palestinian Authority, who they had realized can't be trusted and that was an enemy. It did not bode well. And now we find out there's even members of Netanyahu's government who've taken bribes from the Qataris even after 10/7. The entire upper echelon of the Shin Bet and Mossad had to go. You can't bungle something of this magnitude and carry on. The IDF was a complete and utter failure on 10/7. Yes, there were some marvelous young men, great young men, heroic young men and women who fought valiantly when their posts were overrun by the Muslims, but no one came to their aid. There were no Apache helicopters lining the border. There was no tanks coming to their rescue, no arrivals of armored personnel carriers. It was at before 7 that the first group of Islamic terrorists went through the fence that they simply used caterpillar bulldozers to punch through, and no one noticed. No one stopped them, and the vast majority of them went in on foot to abuse Jews. And then a second wave came through 4 hours later. And there's no circumstance where the IDF can't respond to southern Israel in 4 hours, but they didn't. And then the third wave came in 4 hours after that. Now 8 hours after the effect, and the IDF still can't respond to protect that border, to keep Muslims from hauling Jews into captivity and to keep more from coming in. It's unconscionable. So while I greatly sympathize with the heroic men and women from the IDF who were on duty in their posts, they weren't listened to, they were not supported, they were abandoned. And so were all of the members of the kibbutzim. So were the young people who attended the rave, the Nova Festival. They were all abandoned. It is a crime against the Jewish people that the IDF was so totally and completely inept. And it reminds me of the United States in World War II, where 3,000 servicemen from mostly U.S. Navy sailors were killed by the Japanese in what should not have been a surprise attack. But America was asleep at the switch and had all of their Navy, except their carriers, all lined up. We'll just do this later. No reason to put it back in now. Had them all lined up and ready to go and to be attacked, and lost 3,000 service people, only to sacrifice 350,000 in terms of total casualties pursuing vengeance. When you sacrifice 350,000 bodies and lives to avenge the death of 3,000, you aren't moral, you aren't sane, you aren't rational. And yet that's what the United States did. And the United States wants to celebrate it as a great victory. It's absurd. And there was so many better ways to go about that war. I've laid them out in previous papers that I have written. And now Israel has suffered almost 500 soldiers dead in the ground war in Gaza. And now they're pursuing the lives of 20 living captives. And the overwhelming preponderance of the 200 that have been returned were not returned because the IDF was there, but because Israel capitulated to what Hamas's original goal was, which is to trade those that they have abducted for convicted Islamic terrorists. It was an insane approach and suicidal for Israel. And so the government needs to resign. You need to start over. The IDF, all of its leadership needed to just resign because there were rank and file soldiers in the IDF who witnessed the practice runs for 10/7, who knew it was going to occur, and who told their superiors, and their superiors ignored it. I mean, it's beyond resigning. They should be court-martialed. But the IDF lost for a significant period of time its respect amongst Israelis, and it was the only universally respected entity. Well, the Haredim don't respect anybody, but other than them, that was it. I will say one other thing, too, about Israel that is a concern, and that is that Israel, you are a house divided, and you have to resolve this. You have 20% of Israelis who are progressives, who are using the hostages to destroy Israel, clamoring for the government to resign, clamoring for the government to do anything, trade, no matter what it is that the devil wants, to do any deal to get the hostages back. You have committed suicide on behalf of your country. You should be ashamed of yourself. And the reason they're able to rally around the hostage families is because the overwhelming preponderance of the young people who would attend a rave with a giant Buddha in Israel would be secular and liberal. And the vast majority of those who like the kibbutz lifestyle, a kibbutz was the first expression of communism on our planet. They are overwhelmingly liberal, and so you have liberals representing the hostages on both sides of the equation, both from the rave and from the kibbutzim, and they hated the government anyway, and they used this as a tool to take down the government that was voted into power, and with the liberals having virtually no seats left in the Knesset. And then on the other side, you have the Haredim, which are counterproductive. They're not just useless, they're parasites. And they not only won't defend Israel, they demand that Israel support their religious lifestyle while they render the Haredim useless to serve. And this idea of having the Haredim do what is honorable in Israel and fulfill an obligation to serve in the IDF, well, that sounds fair. They'd be counterproductive. They're worse than useless. They are not taught anything in their yeshivas that have any value to anyone. They're so wrapped up in all of their religious rituals that they can't provide any value. And so this is 40% of Israel that is not only useless, but counterproductive on both extremes. And it's a house divided. And Israel is a tiny country, can't survive that because you have another 20% of the Israeli population that are Muslims inside of Israel, who as Muslims have been raised to believe from what the Quran says that it's appropriate to demonize and kill Jews. So you got 60% of your electorate that is destructive. And you haven't even been able to establish a constitution. So you have a court that can rule on anything. They're not elected, they're exceedingly liberal, and they can deem anything unreasonable. And it doesn't matter what the elected officials actually say. So you've got yourself in this horrible mess. And that's why you get back to the third point that I raised. What we have to do, and we have to do it, you have to do it now, Israel, is you got to return to Yahweh. He is your only solution at this time. And it's why I do the YAHOWAH blog. We are now reached the point. You can see Richard now no longer working with the laptop that serves the teleprompter, because obviously we're not going to get that resolved here during this program. But it gave me a chance to speak to the heart, from the heart to Israel. But with the rain coming in, even though this area that I'm under right now is covered, you can see from everything blowing that the wind, the trade winds here, bring in the rain from the side, and those books that are a reminder that there is a treasure trove of information. Absolute proof of everything that I'm saying is contained in those books, which are at yadayah.com and free to you. Those books do not do well in rain. So we do have to cover them up when it appears that we're going to get a rainstorm. So I thank you for listening. I realized that this was going to be an episode 6 of The Voice, where we were going to delve back into the 103rd Mizmor, but I am always uncomfortable dealing with God's testimony unless I can present it to you accurately and completely. And the only way to do that is to be able to recite the translations that I have invested the last 24 years of my life preparing for this purpose. And that's the reason why we tuck our camera behind a teleprompter screen and put the translations on a laptop in front of it, so that I can share them with you in this kind of a setting. But sometimes that program has a mind of its own and decides to operate a little differently. So I thank you for allowing me to go onto this detour. It's something I wanted to bring up again, particularly with Donald Trump having received $16 billion worth of bribes and being in the womb of the monster, now in the process of betraying Israel on his trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Arab Emirates. So once again, thank you. May God bless Yisrael, and may we, as those who support and love Yisrael, love Yehudim, love Yahweh and his beloved Son, stand together, work together, speak together, and bring God's people back home. Thank you for listening.